everyone. This model question is related with the solar flare. Now sometimes this concept is seen in news, the solar flare, sunspot, this kind of terms frequently comes in news, and this particular question is regarding the effects or the impact of solar flare. So going through the question, the solar flare occurs when the magnetic energy that has built up in the solar atmosphere is suddenly released. Right? Which of the following could possibly be the result or results of such an event? And we have been given three events like northern lights, electrical disruption, hampering communication systems. Now let's take a look at what is solar flare. Now solar flare means this random burst of energy right now, or the charged particles coming from the sun, and that we call it as solar flare. As you can see here in this picture, right, in these regions we are having the solar flare. Now the solar flare is sometimes the impact or it's caused because of the sunspot. Okay, sunspot is a current affair related with geography, and I have covered this topic sunspot in one of our videos. You can find the link of that video in the description below. Anyway, the sunspot, it means dark regions on the surface of the sun, right? So the sunspot, it will look like this. We'll be having dark spots on the surface of the sun. But doesn't mean if you're having dark spots, don't think the energy coming from the sun is less. Rather than this dark spot is due to the the burst of magnetic activity taking place during taking place in the surface of the sun. So that means more amount of charged particles, right? The electrons or the charged particles coming from the sun will be increasing during this sunspot events, right? And during the sunspot, due to that magnetic activity, the energy will be getting released in the form of solar flare. So the sunspot and solar flare, they're both related together. They're related, and during the solar flare, we'll be having increased number of charged particles coming from the sun. Okay. Now this, this charged particles coming from the sun, there is another term used to represent this, which is solar wind. Okay. So solar wind or the solar flare, they're almost similar. And it means the charged particles coming from the sun is increasing, right? And when they are coming towards the earth, and if they could reach the earth's surface, right, it's very harmful for the earth in the sense it can even wipe out the atmosphere. But luckily, we got the magnetosphere or the magnetic shield around the earth. Earth is acting as a magnet, and for that reason, we are having the magnetic shield, and the solar wind coming from the sun will get deflected, will get diverted from the equatorial region more towards the polar region. So all of these solar wind or the solar flare or the charged particles, they are diverted towards the the polar regions and the magnetic north pole as well as the magnetic south pole. And this solar wind, the charged particles, it interacts with the ionosphere in the Earth's atmosphere, which is over towards the top. Okay, and this ionosphere is having more ions. Ions is same as that of the charged particles. So the charged particles coming from the sun interacting with the charged particles in the ionosphere will be creating the aurora formations. And the terms you have to remember, they are aurora borealis and aurora australis. Aurora means the sun will be appearing in different colors as green or reddish or sometimes even violet. Okay. And these charged particles, these charged particles coming from the sun can disturb the communication systems, right? Say the radio communication, or it can affect the space weather in the sense the way we communicate with the satellites, the satellite communication, the radio communication, everything can be disturbed if you are having these charged particles coming towards the sun. Okay, and even it can sometimes even hamper the electricity distribution, right? The power grid failure is associated sometimes with the incidences of solar wind and solar flare. Going back to the question, which of the following could possibly be the result or results of such an event, like the solar flare? So solar flare means the burst of energy, right, due to the magnetic activity taking place on the surface of the sun or the atmosphere of the sun. And the northern lights, right? Northern lights is another name used to represent the aurora borealis, right? The way to remember it is the aurora borealis, right? It's on the northern hemisphere. Aurora australis, right? Australis is over the southern hemisphere. So you can relate it like that. Aurora australis over the southern hemisphere and aurora borealis over the northern hemisphere. And aurora borealis is also called as northern lights, and aurora australis is also called as southern lights, right? So here the first statement, the northern lights is associated with the solar flares, And going through the options, you can eliminate the option B. Now the second one, electrical disruption. I mean, as I already said, if you are having more solar flares coming to the surface of the sun, right, it can hamper the power grid. I mean, it can result in power grid failures and thus can result in electrical disruption, right? Again, 2 is also correct. And if you go through the options, we can eliminate all the options without 2, and which is also having 1. And in that case, the answer comes out as D, which is 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Anyway, going through the third one, hampering communication systems, which is again true, right? So you have to remember that the solar flare, the energy, the charged particles coming from the sun can result or can affect the space weather. It can affect the satellite communication, like the electrical disruption, or like it can cause the natural phenomena like weather events. I mean, natural atmospheric events like the northern lights as well as the southern lights. So here the answer comes out as D, which is 1, 2, and 3.